The desert stretched endlessly beneath the silver glow of the moon, a vast expanse of rolling dunes that seemed to pulse with a quiet, unspoken life. Each grain of sand shimmered like powdered starlight, reflecting the soft illumination in a way that made the entire landscape appear as though it had been dusted with magic. The night was still, but it was alive with the whispers of wind brushing across the dunes, the occasional rustle of dry brush, and the distant call of a nocturnal creature, a sound half familiar, half mystical, that seemed to echo across the emptiness. The moon hung low and full, its pale light stretching shadows long and bending them around the curves of the desert, painting everything with a ghostly elegance. She moved slowly across the sand, her bare feet sinking slightly with every step, leaving delicate imprints that vanished almost immediately as the wind caressed the ground, erasing her passage as though she had never been there. Wrapped tightly in a blanket, she had felt the cold earlier, the chill of night seeping into her bones after a long day of travel under the relentless sun. Now the warmth of the evening air had softened enough to coax her into slowing her pace, letting her senses take in the richness of the desert night, the dry scent of earth, the faint metallic tang of distant stone, and the whisper of leaves from the lone trees that clung to survival along the oasis she had stumbled upon. The oasis itself was a small miracle, a pool of reflective water surrounded by sparse, stubborn greenery. The surface of the water caught the moonlight perfectly, casting silvery ripples that danced across the surrounding sand. It was here she had chosen to rest, drawn by the promise of shelter and serenity in the middle of the otherwise harsh wilderness. She had set up her small camp, arranging her blanket carefully on the soft sand, and had taken a moment to simply breathe, to listen, to feel, to absorb the profound solitude that only a place like this could offer. The quiet was both comforting and intoxicating. Every sound, every subtle movement seemed amplified in the stillness. A gentle wind rustled the leaves of the palms, and she watched as the shadows twisted and flickered with a hypnotic rhythm. In this isolation, she felt simultaneously exposed and invincible. There was no one to judge her, no one to demand she hide the truth of herself. The desert had a way of stripping away the unnecessary layers, revealing the rawness beneath, and she welcomed it with a mixture of awe and reverence. She sat on the blanket, legs drawn close, and let her gaze wander over the moonlit expanse. The sand stretched out in waves, undulating as though the earth itself were breathing. The horizon shimmered faintly, a mirage of distant dunes that seemed to float, ethereal and unattainable. Stars peppered the sky above, countless and brilliant, forming constellations she recognized only vaguely, their ancient stories whispering across time. It was as if the entire universe had paused to watch this moment, to honor the fragile, fleeting serenity of her presence within it. Her heart was steady, yet there was a quiet ache in her chest, a yearning she could not name, a longing for something beyond the horizon, beyond the safe cocoon of her blanket. The moonlight touched her skin through the thin fabric, caressing her shoulders and arms, warming her in its gentle, untouchable way. The blanket was comforting, yes, but also confining, a soft barrier between her and the world she wanted to feel, truly feel, in its entirety. As she adjusted her blanket, the cool night air licked at her skin, reminding her of the thin boundary between safety and exposure, between solitude and the unknown. She inhaled deeply, savoring the scent of the earth, the whisper of wind, the quiet music of the desert, and in that inhale, she felt a stirring, a prelude to the vulnerability she would soon embrace, a foreshadowing of a night that would shift the contours of her existence in ways she could not yet imagine. The desert waited, patient and eternal, a silent witness to the unfolding of stories it had seen countless times yet never tired of observing. And in that moment, under the moon's gentle eye, she understood that tonight, she was not merely passing through the desert. She belonged to it, even if only fleetingly, wrapped in a fragile cocoon of sand, shadow, and moonlight. The night had grown deeper, the moon climbing higher, its silver light now spilling across the oasis with a gentle insistence, casting everything in an ethereal glow. She sat on the soft blanket, feeling its warmth against her skin. But tonight the heat of fabric felt like a barrier, a shield she no longer wished to maintain. The desert air had softened to a pleasant chill, caressing her exposed arms and legs, teasing her with the kind of intimacy that only nature could provide. Her heart thumped, a steady rhythm echoing in her ears, yet not from fear, but from a strange, exhilarating awareness that she was utterly alone in the open, and utterly free. Slowly, almost reverently, she loosened her grip on the blanket. The act felt monumental, though outwardly it was just a simple gesture. She allowed the fabric to slip from her shoulders, letting it fall to the sand. It landed with a whisper, the sound amplified in the hushed night. For a brief moment she stared at it, the heavy folds lying innocently at her feet, and then looked up at the moon. Its glow seemed to approve, bathing her in light so pure and cold that it kissed every contour of her body. She rose to her feet, barefoot, toes sinking into the warm sand. The cool air met her skin, brushing along her arms and legs, stirring shivers that were not unpleasant. Every nerve felt heightened, alert to the subtle sounds around her. The rustling of leaves, the distant hum of a nocturnal creature, the soft ripple of water in the oasis. The desert was alive, and in this moment, she was alive within it, part of its rhythm, a silent witness to its eternal presence. There was a vulnerability to standing exposed under the open sky, under the moon that illuminated every curve, every movement. She could feel her heartbeat in her chest, her breath catching as though the night itself was watching, assessing, acknowledging her. Yet there was no shame, no fear, only a profound awareness of herself, the delicate balance between fragility and strength, between openness and self-possession. She let her arms fall loosely to her sides, feeling the air play across her skin, imagining it carrying away all pretense, all the layers she had worn through the day, through life. The moonlight traced patterns across her shoulders, down her back, glinting off her hair like molten silver. In its glow she felt almost otherworldly, suspended between reality and something more eternal, more elemental. Each breath she drew was deeper, richer, carrying the scent of sand, of water, of desert flora in bloom under the moon. The blanket lay forgotten, a discarded relic of her past self, and she stood, unshielded and unashamed, fully in the present. A whisper of wind curled around her, teasing her hair across her face. She tilted her head back, letting it lift the strands, letting it touch her as if the desert itself were acknowledging her courage, her audacity, her surrender to the moment. There was something thrilling in the exposure, in the simplicity of it, the pure honesty of standing naked under the celestial gaze, a solitary figure in a vast, silver world. She felt herself expanding as if the moonlight had seeped into her bones, filling her with a quiet confidence, a raw serenity. For the first time in a long while, she realized she didn't need to hide, not from the desert, not from the night, not from herself. The moon witnessed her, the oasis reflected her, and in that reflection she recognized a fragile, fierce beauty. Vulnerability had never felt so freeing, so potent, and as the night deepened around her, a sense of anticipation curled quietly in her chest, a knowing that something, someone might soon notice, might soon disturb this fragile equilibrium. But for now, there was only her, the sand and the moonlight, and in that sacred combination, she allowed herself a single, unguarded moment, completely exposed, completely alive, and completely free. The desert, which had seemed so private, so wholly hers, shifted in atmosphere. The moonlight still bathed the sand and oasis in silver, but now there was a subtle change in the air, a presence that was neither wind nor shadow. She sensed it before she saw it, a quiet disturbance in the rhythm of the night, a barely perceptible disturbance that made her skin tingle and her breath catch. The sensation was foreign, thrilling and dangerous all at once. From the shadows at the edge of the oasis, a figure emerged. He moved with a quiet confidence, each step measured, deliberate, as though the sand itself bent to accommodate him. His presence was commanding, yet he made no sound, no rustle to announce himself beyond the soft whisper of his movement. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with an aura of danger wrapped in a kind of rugged elegance. The moonlight traced along the angles of his face, highlighting the intensity in his eyes and the faint shadows of a life spent under harsh suns and starlit skies. For a moment she froze. Her heart raced, not with fear exactly, but with a sudden electric awareness. The vulnerability she had embraced moments ago now shimmered with an edge of risk. Every instinct in her body, honed through years of caution, whispered that this stranger was not casual, not ordinary. And yet there was something magnetic about him, a pull she could not and did not wish to resist. He stopped a few paces from her, far enough to respect the fragile boundary of the moment, close enough that she could feel the intensity radiating from him. He did not speak. did not step further, yet his eyes held her with the force of unspoken words. There was a recognition in them, a weight of experience and desire tempered by restraint. She had never met him, and yet it felt as though he had always been a part of the night, a shadow waiting for her in the silver-lit desert. The stillness between them stretched, taut as a bowstring. The sound of the wind through the palms, the gentle ripple of the oasis, and even her own heartbeat seemed magnified, echoing in the space that separated them. Each moment of silence was heavy with possibility, pregnant with the knowledge that this encounter would change the course of the night, or perhaps the course of something far deeper. And then, faintly, almost as if unwilling to break the fragile tension, he whispered. The words were low, husky, carried on the desert breeze. Sweet mercy, you'll ruin me. There was something in the timbre of his voice that was both warning and confession, a line drawn in the sand that was impossible to ignore. Her breath caught again, this time at the sound of the words themselves, at the vulnerability he betrayed even as he tried to mask it with authority. She studied him, searching for his intent, deciphering the delicate dance in his gaze, the way it flickered between desire and caution, fascination and fear. There was a history in those eyes, untold stories, scars of battles both external and internal, and for the first time that night she felt a true mirror to her own vulnerability. A man who could see her fully, who could acknowledge her nakedness not just of body but of spirit, without judgment. The desert seemed to hold its breath with them, the oasis reflecting their silhouettes in silvered water. Everything was quiet, but everything was charged. The moon continued its silent watch, casting its light over the unfolding tension, its glow magnifying the magnetic pull between them. In that moment she realized that the desert night had shifted irrevocably. Nothing would ever feel the same again. And though neither of them moved closer, the invisible thread between them had been drawn taut, vibrating with a promise, a warning, and a desire that neither could deny. The desert seemed to close in around them, the air charged with a tension that was almost tangible. His whisper, "Sweet mercy, you'll ruin me," lingered in the space between them, a fragile thread woven from desire, warning, and vulnerability. It was not merely a sentence, it was a confession, a tremor of something deeper than physical attraction, something that clawed at the edges of restraint. She felt it in her bones, a pull that was magnetic and dangerous. Her pulse raced and every nerve in her body seemed suddenly alive, alert to the smallest movement, the faintest sound. The desert, once serene and solitary, had become a stage for an unspoken ritual, a silent dance of gazes, breaths, and unvoiced longing. Her own voice trembled when she finally spoke, though the words were barely more than a whisper. "Who are you?" He did not answer immediately, letting the tension stretch, letting her feel the weight of his presence fully. His eyes roamed her form, not with lewdness but with a kind of reverent intensity, as if he were seeing not just the surface, but every layer of her courage and fear, every hidden corner of her spirit. Finally he spoke again, voice low and steady, resonant with restrained emotion. Someone who should not feel this, yet cannot look away. There was a vulnerability in him that mirrored her own, a crack in the armor he wore so carefully. That single admission set something trembling deep within her, a recognition that she was not alone in her exposure. The moonlight cast long shadows across his features, highlighting the tension in his jaw, the faint creases that told of a life lived on edge, of restraint constantly tested. He was both predator and protector, both danger and sanctuary, and she sensed that any step forward could ignite a fire neither of them could control. She shifted slightly on the sand, aware of the way the cool night air brushed against her skin, heightening every sensation. Her bare feet sank into the soft dunes, anchoring her to the earth while her mind raced with the implications of his presence. This man, standing silently under the moonlight, had the power to unmake the careful boundaries she had built around herself, or to transform the night into something sacred and unforgettable. He stepped a fraction closer, not enough to cross her line, but enough that she could feel the intensity of his gaze like a tangible weight, pressing gently on her chest. Every breath he took mingled with hers, carrying with it the faint scent of leather, earth, and smoke, a fragrance that spoke of journeys through harsh lands and even harsher truths. It was intoxicating, dangerous, and entirely consuming. Her lips parted slightly as if to speak, yet no words came. The silence stretched, filled with the sound of their heartbeats and the desert's gentle sigh. In that quiet, the whisper of the wind seemed to echo his confession, carrying it across the dunes and weaving it into the silvered landscape. Sweet mercy, the phrase reverberated in her mind, a warning, a promise, and a question all at once. For a moment they simply stood there, two figures suspended in moonlight, the world outside their bubble forgotten. The connection between them was fragile yet undeniable, a thread of intimacy that did not need to be spoken aloud. Each knew the stakes, the desire, the danger, and the transformative power of what hung in the air, and each felt, without acknowledging it yet, that this night could change everything, leaving them forever altered by a single whispered truth in the moonlit desert. The moon continued its silent watch, casting its silver glow over the oasis and the two figures standing within it, witnessing the delicate balance between restraint and surrender. The moon hung high now, a silver sentinel over the desert illuminating the oasis and the tension that crackled between them. The air seemed heavier, charged with something unspoken yet undeniable. Every glance, every shift of weight carried weight. Every brush of wind against her skin made her shiver, not from cold but from awareness of him, of the closeness, of the slow, intoxicating pull that neither could deny. She remained on the blanket, though she no longer needed its warmth. Her bare arms and legs caught the moonlight, gleaming faintly in the night. He did not look away, and the intensity of his gaze pressed on her, thrilling and unnerving her all at once. There was no rush, no sudden movement. Yet in the deliberate stillness, the air between them seemed to pulse with desire. He shifted slightly, a subtle lean forward, just enough to make her feel the nearness of him without crossing any line. It was a dance of restraint, an unspoken understanding of boundaries and danger. Every inch of proximity heightened the awareness of their own vulnerability. The thrill of exposure intensified by the presence of someone who could see her, truly see her without judgment. Her chest rose and fell, breath shallow, each inhalation tinged with anticipation. She wanted to step closer, to bridge the space that separated them. Yet a part of her hesitated, aware that this man, so rugged, so commanding, carried with him an intensity she could not fully predict. She was drawn to him like the tides to the moon, but the pull was laced with risk, with the knowledge that surrendering to desire could be transformative and dangerous in equal measure. He let a hand drift toward her, stopping short of touching. The motion was slow, deliberate, filled with promise. She did not flinch. Instead, she leaned subtly toward him, drawn by the tension, the electricity between them. His eyes flicked to hers, a silent question, a warning, and in that instant, she felt the full weight of their mutual temptation, the magnetic force that neither wanted to resist, yet both knew carried consequences. The desert around them seemed to fade. The rustle of palms, the gentle lap of water against the oasis, the distant hum of insects, all of it became background to the intensity that enveloped them. The world had narrowed to the silver light, the sand beneath her feet, and the man who had stepped into her solitude and stirred something deep within her. She felt her lips part, an almost instinctive response to the presence of someone who could provoke desire without a single touch. He noticed, and a subtle shift crossed his features, an acknowledgement of the danger, a recognition of the power she held over him. Even as he held himself back, the moment stretched, timeless yet fleeting, a suspended breath in the desert night. The temptation was unbearable, a slow-burning fire that ignited with every heartbeat, every glance, every subtle movement. They were drawn together yet apart, suspended on the knife's edge of restraint, each aware that the next step could change everything. And in the silence, broken only by the whisper of wind and the occasional ripple of water, they understood it without words. This was a dance, a delicate negotiation of desire and control, a test of boundaries that neither could resist. The moon bore witness to their tension, to the slow, inexorable pull toward something that both terrified and thrilled them. In that charged, silvered stillness, they both knew that the night had just begun, and that it would demand courage, honesty, and surrender in equal measure. The desert seemed to lean in closer, as if listening to their unspoken tension, holding its breath with them. The pull between them had grown unbearable, yet neither moved beyond the subtle space they had carved in the sand. Instead, they spoke cautiously at first, testing the waters with words that hinted at what lay beneath the surface. "I shouldn't be here," she admitted softly, her voice barely louder than the whispering wind. Her gaze dropped to the rippling water of the oasis, its surface reflecting the silvered moonlight. But I had nowhere else to go tonight. The admission was simple, almost mundane, yet it carried the weight of solitude, exhaustion, and a vulnerability she rarely let anyone see. He nodded slowly, the shadow of a smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "The desert has a way of showing who we are," he murmured, "stripping away what we hide, leaving only what we cannot deny." His voice was quiet but deliberate, carrying a gravitas that matched the stillness of the night. She sensed that his words were more than philosophical. They were confession, warning, and acknowledgement all at once. The blanket lay forgotten behind her, the cool sand under her fingers a reminder of how exposed she was. Yet she felt safer with him than she had alone. There was no judgment in his gaze, only a quiet recognition of her truth. The desert, the moon, the water, all conspired to create a space where she could speak freely. "I've always run," she admitted, the words catching slightly in her throat, "from expectations. From people. From myself." Her voice trembled, not from fear but from the act of releasing long-held burdens into the air. "I didn't know if I'd ever stop." His gaze softened, shadows playing across his angular features. "And yet here you are," he said, standing in the moonlight, naked, not just in body but in spirit. He paused as though measuring his own admission. "I've spent years building walls, keeping people out, keeping myself contained. But seeing you here now, it's hard to hold them up." There it was, the crack in his armor, the glimpse of a man who had lived in control and restraint, now unsettled by her presence, by the honesty they shared. She felt a thrill of connection, a recognition that their vulnerabilities were meeting in the night like colliding streams, merging to form something deeper than attraction. "You're not alone," she whispered, surprising herself with the certainty of the statement. "Whatever it is that brought you here, whatever holds you back, you don't have to carry it alone." He looked at her then fully, and the intensity of his gaze made her pulse quicken. "And yet I've waited so long," he confessed, "for someone who could see me, not for what I protect myself against, but for what I truly am. Someone like you. I didn't think such a person existed." Their voices faded into silence, the words suspended between them like fragile glass. The night held them, and in the soft rustling of leaves and the whisper of wind, they found an intimacy that was not yet physical, but infinitely more profound. Each secret shared, each fear confessed drew them closer, weaving an invisible bond stronger than the pull of desire alone. The moonlight seemed to linger longer on them, blessing their honesty, reflecting their mirrored vulnerabilities in the silvered water. In that sacred space, they understood something essential. They were not just two people drawn together by chance and desire. They were two souls recognizing each other's truths, finding resonance in the desert night. And for the first time, she allowed herself to hope that the night would not only reveal their desires, but also their capacity to trust, to surrender, and to be seen fully without fear of ruin. The silence between them was no longer empty. It had weight, depth, and a rhythm all its own. Words had given way to glances, to subtle shifts of posture, to the unspoken language of bodies that had recognized one another before they even touched. Every movement carried intention. Every breath seemed synchronized with the others. She shifted on the blanket, the soft sand pressing into her skin, and he noticed the subtle curve of her shoulder as she leaned slightly toward the moonlight. It was a deliberate, almost unconscious motion, and it drew him in, not aggressively, but with a gravity that felt inevitable. He mirrored her movement ever so slightly, reducing the distance between them without breaking the fragile boundary they had maintained all night. The air thickened, warm with anticipation, carrying the scent of earth, sand, and something more primal, something uniquely theirs. Her pulse drummed in her ears, yet she was aware of his as well. The tension in his chest, the restraint in his hands. It was a dance of desire, careful and deliberate, each step measured so as not to shatter the delicate intimacy they had built. His gaze lingered on her face, tracing the line of her jaw, the curve of her lips, the way her eyes caught the moonlight. She felt the heat of his attention, and it was exhilarating, frightening, and intoxicating all at once. Her own eyes followed him in turn, drinking in the strength in his form, the subtle movements that spoke of self-control, and the vulnerability hidden just beneath the surface. A faint breeze brushed across her bare skin, carrying with it a whisper of his presence, and she shivered, not from the cold, but from awareness, the electricity that hummed between them. Her fingers twitched slightly in the sand, longing to reach out to close the gap. Yet hesitation held her back. She wanted him, but she also wanted the slow, exquisite torment of anticipation, the tension that made every glance and breath more potent. He extended a hand, palm open, a silent invitation that she recognized immediately. Her fingers brushed his briefly, a feather-light contact that set them both alight. The touch was enough to acknowledge the connection, enough to fan the flames but restrained so that the moment hung suspended, like a breath held between heartbeats. The desert seemed to lean closer with them, the wind whispering through the palms, the oasis water rippling as if in response to their shared energy. There was a rhythm to their unspoken dialogue, a movement toward one another, a retreat, a push, a pull, an elegant, dangerous ballet of desire and restraint. Her breath caught as he lowered his gaze, his eyes tracing the line of her shoulders and collarbone. She felt the pull in her chest, the magnetic tension that promised heat, surrender, and revelation. Yet there was no rush, no breaking of boundaries, only the slow, delicious draw that made each heartbeat feel monumental. Time seemed to stretch and warp in the moonlight, the night elongating to contain them, to hold the delicate space they occupied. And in that suspended moment, she realized that desire was more than touch. It was awareness, acknowledgement, and the thrilling terror of being truly seen. As he stepped a fraction closer, their breaths mingling faintly, the unspoken truth became undeniable. The dance of desire had begun, and neither of them could deny its power. The moonlight bore witness, the desert held its breath, and the oasis reflected the shimmer of anticipation between them, fragile, luminous, and alive. The desert night wrapped around them like a living entity, quiet but heavy with expectation. Every glance, every movement seemed amplified in the silvered light. They were drawn to each other with an intensity that neither could deny, yet a subtle tension lingered beneath the surface, a hesitation rooted in fear, history, and unspoken rules. She felt at first a flicker of doubt in her chest. Her body ached for him, yet a voice inside whispered caution, reminding her of the risks, the consequences of surrendering fully. She had always prized her freedom, her control, and now that it was within reach, she hesitated. To yield completely would mean abandoning herself in ways she had never dared before. He noticed the subtle shift in her posture, the slight stiffening of her shoulders, the fleeting pull back. It mirrored his own conflict. He had never encountered someone who could ignite desire and vulnerability in equal measure. Every instinct screamed to close the gap, to pull her close, to surrender to the magnetic pull. Yet he restrained himself. He had walls built of experience, of pain, of survival, and they were not easily breached. Yet she was unraveling him, challenging the very boundaries he had constructed. Their eyes met, a silent acknowledgement of the storm between them. Desire, fear, longing, and caution swirled in a dangerous mix. He wanted her, not just her body, but the honesty in her gaze, the courage in her presence. And yet he feared losing himself in the process, feared that giving in would destroy the careful control he had maintained for years. She swallowed, her pulse quickening, feeling the weight of his gaze like a tangible pressure against her skin. I don't know if I can, she whispered, the words trembling on her lips. Not a refusal, not a denial, but a confession of uncertainty, of the simultaneous pull of longing and the fear of what it might bring. He stepped closer, close enough to feel the heat radiating from her skin, but not so close as to overwhelm. His voice, low and almost vulnerable, broke the silence. I shouldn't want this. Not like this. And yet, he trailed off, letting the unsaid hang between them. His hand hovered near hers, an unspoken offering, a promise, a temptation, all in one. The desert seemed to hold its breath, the oasis reflecting the tension in silvery ripples. The moonlight illuminated every nuance of their expressions, the fleeting shadow of doubt, the spark of yearning, the delicate negotiation of self against desire. They were both caught in a delicate balance, a push and pull that neither wanted to disrupt, yet neither could resist. Her body leaned subtly toward him, drawn by the magnetic force, while her mind waged war against surrender. He felt her hesitation and mirrored it with his own restraint, aware that the intensity between them could either ignite a passion too powerful to control or shatter the fragile intimacy they had built. And in that charged silence, they recognized a shared truth. Desire alone was not enough. It was the courage to confront fear, to navigate vulnerability, and to respect the boundaries they had carefully maintained that made the connection between them profound. The conflict was not a barrier. It was part of the dance, part of the story unfolding under the moonlight. For a long moment, they simply breathed, the desert holding its gaze, the oasis shimmering, and the moonlight casting a witness glow over the delicate tension that bound them. Both knew that surrender, if it came, would not be a single act, it would be a journey, fragile, dangerous, and unforgettable. The moon hung directly overhead now, flooding the desert in silver light that seemed almost liquid in its intensity. The oasis reflected the luminescence, casting their elongated shadows across the sand like silent witnesses to the night's unfolding drama. They stood close now, the space between them charged with the weight of everything unsaid, every longing, every fear. He finally broke the silence, his voice low but trembling, heavy with an honesty that made her pulse spike. I can't pretend anymore, he admitted, his gaze locking on hers. I've tried to hold back. I've tried to keep control, to maintain the walls I've built around myself. But seeing you, feeling you here, it's impossible. You make me want to let go of everything I thought I needed to protect. Her chest tightened at the vulnerability in his words, the raw confession that mirrored her own internal struggle. For a moment she simply stared, unable to speak, letting the truth of him wash over her. It was disarming, terrifying, and beautiful all at once. She had glimpsed strength and danger. But here was the man behind the mask, unshielded, trembling, and real. You don't know what you do to me, he continued, stepping closer, though still respecting the fragile boundary between them. You don't know how completely you've unraveled me with a single glance, a single word, a single movement. I am undone by you, and I've never been more terrified and alive at the same time. She felt her own barriers crumble. Desire had always been present, but now it was layered with something deeper, an understanding, a recognition that this man was as vulnerable as she was, and that their connection was no longer just physical. Her voice was soft yet filled with certainty. I see you. I see all of you, and I don't want to run. Not from you, not from this, whatever this is between us. He inhaled sharply, a mixture of relief and longing in his eyes. For a moment, words failed both of them, and they simply existed in the shared space of moonlight and sand, hearts hammering in sync, breaths mingling in the cool desert air. The oasis rippled silently, the water reflecting the silvered reality of their vulnerability. I've been afraid, he confessed finally, the edge of desperation breaking through his restraint. Afraid that someone like you, someone brave enough to stand here, naked under the moon, could destroy me. But standing here, hearing you say that, I realize that I don't want to be whole without you. You've already changed me. Her hand lifted slowly, almost instinctively, bridging the final inches between them. He caught it, the touch tentative yet electric, a silent promise that neither would force the other, yet both were ready to surrender to what they had begun. Their connection was no longer a question of temptation. It was truth laid bare, undeniable and consuming. The moon bore witness, the desert listened, and the oasis mirrored their shared revelation. In that moment, the world beyond the dunes and starlight ceased to exist. There was only them, two souls exposed, unguarded, and entwined by more than desire, by trust, by understanding, by the delicate and irreversible truth of recognition. They were both changed. The night, the moon, the desert, and each other had stripped away pretense, leaving only what could not be denied, a bond that could ruin or redeem, that could destroy or transform, but above all, a connection that was as eternal as the dunes themselves. The desert was hushed now, the wind softened to a gentle caress, the moon casting a silver glow that made everything shimmer with quiet reverence. They stood close, hands barely touching, breaths mingling, hearts still racing from the confessions of the night. Every layer of fear, every fragment of restraint had been stripped away, leaving only the raw, fragile truth between them. She traced her fingertips along the back of his hand, feeling the heat of him, the subtle tremor that spoke of desire restrained and yet impossible to deny. He met her gaze, eyes heavy with emotion, searching for permission, for consent, for acknowledgement that the night they shared was more than fleeting, more than temptation. It was choice, it was connection. Neither spoke immediately. The desert around them seemed to hold its breath, the oasis reflecting their silhouettes like twin shadows bound by moonlight. Time itself seemed suspended, neither forward nor backward, only this moment that demanded awareness, presence, and courage. He finally spoke, low and deliberate. Tonight. This moment. It doesn't have to define everything, but it will define something. You've touched me in ways I didn't think possible. You've seen me, and I've seen you. And now there's no going back. His hand brushed hers again, tentative but certain, a promise of connection without possession, of intimacy without compulsion. She felt the truth of his words resonate deep within her. The blanket lay forgotten. The desert stretched endlessly around them, and yet it felt as though they were the only two souls in existence. I don't want to go back either, she whispered. Not to who I was before, not to hiding from what I feel. A silence fell again, heavy with meaning, with possibility. They could step closer, succumb fully to the pull between them, surrender to desire, and let the night consume them. Or they could hold the fragile space, honoring what had passed and what was yet to come. The choice was theirs, and theirs alone. He inhaled, the desert air filling his lungs, and then slowly exhaled. Whatever we do it together, and we do it knowing that the night, the moon, the desert, this will always be ours. Whether we surrender now or wait, we're changed. We can't go back. Her lips curved into a faint, knowing smile. Then let's not go back. The words were soft, yet filled with certainty. And with that acknowledgement, the tension shifted. Not erased, not resolved, but transformed. What had been restrained, tentative, and fearful became potential possibility, and profound recognition. They stood together under the moonlight, hands finely entwined, hearts beating in sync, the desert silent but alive around them. In the silver glow they allowed themselves to feel, fully, deeply, without pretense or reservation. The night would witness their choices, the oasis would reflect their vulnerability, and the moon would watch as two souls recognized each other, forever altered by the encounter. The horizon hinted at dawn, but they did not move. Time was theirs to claim or surrender, and in that moment, suspended between desire and caution, exposure and trust, they found the delicate balance between what they wanted and what they feared, and realized that sometimes, the most powerful acts are the ones we choose together. The desert remained eternal. The moon continued its silver vigil, and in the quiet stillness, they lingered, naked, unguarded, and irrevocably changed.